What's up, guys? This is Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with Meta, SPY, and the QQQ. I'm going to talk about some key levels to watch for as time goes on, and what a very awesome tool known as Forecaster is telling us about the future for the stock market, the future for Meta, and real proof about why Forecaster is very, very accurate. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. So Meta was on a very, very big downtrend for many, many weeks. And down here in the 580s and 590s, people were panicking. They thought Meta was going to crash. I saw people in the comments section just saying it's the end of the world for Meta. I, however, said the opposite. I mentioned to everyone that no, I think Meta is going to be looking for a very, very nice bounce. We did talk about that, and there is real proof of my claim. This is my video from last week where I was using this very awesome tool known as Forecaster, which is very good for looking at what stocks will likely do, using tools to understand if a stock is in a good place to be buying. You could also use it for a financial analysis of what the market is doing. So I'm going to talk about that in just a couple of minutes. But the reason I'm talking about this is because there are other tools out there that repaint their indicators, meaning that they basically watch a stock drop, then when it starts bouncing, then they repaint everything and they make it seem as though they were claiming that, they claim to buy the stock down there, but the overall indicator did not show that until much after, until the stock bounced 10%, right? But in this case, it's different. This is not repainting. Instead, what happened was Meta was dumping, and as Meta was dumping, Forecaster was saying buy. This is where you start dollar cost averaging. This is where you could start buying the stock up, right? This did not wait for it to bounce 10, 20% before we got the buy rating. This happened in real time. And that is a very, very useful tool, because at the end of the day, we can't always time the market perfectly. But when you start dollar cost averaging and you start looking at good places to start entering, it's good to know exactly when that point is going to be. And Forecaster is a very cool tool that helps you get those benefits. It helps assist you, when it comes to knowing when to buy. So in this case, when Meta was dumping to 580 to 590 a share, it bounced to the low 600s and we got this really nice buy rating. That was very, very useful because since it was at the lows, Meta was up essentially 18% today. It did come back down a little bit, but overall, that's an 18% bounce that Forecaster called when it was recommending buying Meta at these low levels, right? And that just goes to show how accurate Forecaster could be when it comes to timing good buy zones, when looking at what stocks will likely do, because Forecaster was telling us the overall market was due for a bounce. And we were talking about that when it comes to SPY, the QQQ, and the others. Also, I just want to note that a stock jumping 5% or 10% is great. When a stock is up 18%, that is fantastic. And Forecaster timed this bottom very, very nicely. This was my video from last week. As you guys could tell, it did a great job. So what is Forecaster telling us about Meta right now? Well, looking at Meta, this is telling us that a month out, we could see a small pullback. In the upcoming weeks, it could actually pull back between 2 and as much as like 3%, and at most 11%, but that's not as likely. And then we're looking for a big bounce again towards $700 a share. This is based off the past correlated events. And I think that there's a very, very good chance for the bullish cases overall based off what we're seeing. Now, Forecaster is a great tool, but it's not just for forecasting stocks. It could be used for all kinds of different things, from looking at seasonality. I've typically gone over seasonality and fundamental analysis in my previous videos, but a new feature that came out is to be able to look at what a business is doing and how its fundamentals are looking in a much more concise manner. So looking at these tools, you could see when you click on Business Explained Simple, you could see what Meta is, what it's about, what they are known for when it comes to tech, and which platforms they own. And you can see what they do and what their current goals are. You could see everything just like that. I think it's very, very cool. You could also click on other things such as investor sentiment. This will help you see what the bulls are saying about Meta. Are they bullish? What do the bears say? This is a very, very cool tool to know what the unbiased analysis is of the stock. So being able to look at summaries of what the stock is looking like by looking at their business and such, and then simultaneously combining that with the fundamental analysis. The fundamental analysis will help you see what is the average fair value of Meta. Obviously, we're still below the average fair value, and where we could see the share price going, at least in the future. Look at their sales. They keep on doing better and better and better every year. When it comes to the quarterly data, they've been doing very, very well. And there's a nice uptrend in their overall sales. The net income did slow down a bit because of the taxes they were faced with, but overall, that is just a minor thing. And I still think that they are a cash printing machine. Finally, you could look at the raw data as we typically talk about to look at their balance sheets. You could look at the quarterly data and look at all kinds of different things if you want to see how much they're growing. Look at all the green numbers here. There's so much growth in Meta, which is why this is a great stock for the long term. Now, for the short term, we could be getting a small pullback. That is what forecaster is telling us, right? If I go back to our indicator right over here, let me just pull this up real quick. If you look at the projection for Meta, there is a risk that let me just go to the 1 month time frame right here, that we might be coming down a bit before we see a massive bounce in the upcoming month, and we still could be looking for a nice run up towards that $700 area. So we're going to just look at this 1 month out, and there is so much upside potential for Meta. Even if we get a small pullback here and we end up retracing to like the 640s, we could be looking for a 2 to 5% pullback again before this sees a massive bounce back up towards the $700 area. And that's the very useful thing about Forecaster. Now, on top of this, I want to talk about a couple of more things. When we look at SPY and many others, tickers such as like SPY and the QQQ, there are some risks with the current market, okay? When I pull up Forecaster again, you will see that for the S&P 500, the SPY ETF, we're very bullish 3 months out. But for the short term, it is suggesting there's the possibility of a 3% or so correction that could be coming, a small pullback before we see a massive bounce. And that is what's going to likely end up happening. So forecasters warning us that the market may be getting a small pullback before we continue to run again, at least for many months out. And that's a very, very strong possibility looking at the current setups. Right? Is the market overbought or oversold? We're actually quite neutral right now. We're not really overbought or oversold. We're also not getting any like sell ratings. So we're not necessarily entering like a bear market or anything like that. There just might be another pullback phase before we continue to push. And then our projection is still bullish overall for SPY, even if we get that small pullback. The QQQ is almost identical. I'm going to switch over to the QQQ. You could see that for the QQQ, the same thing is going on. We could be looking for some kind of temporary pullback move before we see some kind of big bounce. So that is also another strong possibility. So why might the market pull back a bit? Well, we're going to switch over to SPY right here. Then I'll talk about the QQQ. Firstly, you'll see that there's the possibility of a left shoulder ahead, and if we get a rejection here, it depends. I do think we consolidate. We could even go a tiny bit higher temporarily, but then if we get that bigger pullback, we could be forming a right shoulder for an inverse head and shoulders before we see the market continue to skyrocket to new all-time highs. SPY is also forming a bearish divergence, which could be indicative of a potential top that's coming. On top of that, there are gaps to fill on SPY. So on the daily time frame, for example, we have this gap over here. There's an unfilled gap at 675 that could get filled, which makes me suspect that there is some risk. Now, when might the market pull back? Well, honestly, guys, it depends. I'm not sure if the pullback starts now, but there's also FOMC coming up on December 10th. The market is almost fully priced in a potential cut by the Fed, and that could be fully priced in. And this could be kind of like a buy the rumor, sell the news event, because we know the Fed is buying back treasuries and everyone is just so bullish. They think the market's going to squeeze for all of December. I think we are going to be very bullish for the end of December, but before that happens, one last pullback could come before we see a massive squeeze, because I think a lot of what the Fed is doing could be priced in. And because everyone's expecting Jerome Powell to launch the market super hard up, we could get the opposite. So we'll see, just to be safe, but I just want to note that this level right here is very key. SPY has gotten lots of rejections in the 685s in the past, and we'll see if that happens again. So based off what forecaster is telling us, we could be looking for a consolidation move, and then we could be retracing back down towards like 665 before we see a massive bounce to finish off the year, and then we break out to new all-time highs for 700 plus. If we do get some kind of pullback like this, it's going to be a good buying opportunity. The reason I call that 665 is because this aligns with our key fib level just like this, so keep that in mind. There is that risk of a pullback if we get a rejection. On the QQQ, So forecaster is telling us that for the QQQ, we're basically bullish. We're very, very bullish, but we might see a temporary dip as much as 1.46% to about 5% or sometimes in the middle before we continue to run. That's the most likely possibility based off our past correlated events and also based off what we're seeing so far on the charts. Are we overbought or oversold? We're not really overbought yet. We're getting close to being overbought on the QQQ, by the way. And there's no sell ratings or anything like that on the advanced DPO. We're still kind of neutral, but we're going to be watching this very closely based off our projections. So heading back down here, we're going to see if we get some kind of like pullback before we try to bounce or not. On the QQQ, we have a very similar setup, a left shoulder ahead. And we're going to see if we kind of like go a little bit higher before we consolidate. And if we get a big rejection, we could be forming that right shoulder to basically form a giant inverse head and shoulders to finish off the year towards all-time highs like this. We'll see if we get the pullback, but I do think the odds do favor that. And even if we do pull back a bit, it's going to be nothing more than a buying opportunity, and we remain more bullish for the end of the year. On the daily time frame, the QQQ also has some gaps below to fill, especially in the 610s. So some kind of pullback move would be very, very healthy before we try to squeeze to new all-time highs. But overall, I still remain more bullish for the end of the year, even if we do pull back just a bit. So that is what forecasters are suggesting for SPY and the QQQ right now. And then we also happen to have very nice looking inverse head and shoulders like patterns on both SPY and the QQQ. So could this be indicative of the fact that the market's going to consolidate and maybe start to pull back a bit? It's possible. It's very, very likely. And we'll see if we get some kind of big rebound or not. So watch your levels very, very closely. Last but not least, I want to talk about Nvidia stock. Nvidia has a nice accumulation that's forming right here in inverse head and shoulders. But when we pull up Forecaster, once again, you could use Forecaster for all kinds of different things, such as looking at what the business is doing, what Nvidia is known for, as they are built around their GPU sales and development of AI. So if you want to get a quick summary of what they're doing, you could see everything just like this. And I think that's very, very awesome for people who are kind of like new to the markets, who want to know about what a company is doing. And then simultaneously, you could look at their fundamentals. How are they looking? The average fair value is obviously well above where we currently are, which tells us that Nvidia is undervalued. And if we do get some kind of pullback move, it's going to be nothing more than a buying opportunity. The balance sheet's very, very bullish for Nvidia as always, so it still looks very strong. But looking at the projections, I just want to mention that 1 month out, this is telling us that Nvidia might pull back a bit. There is a risk of it dropping as much as like 5%. If we do get some kind of pullback in the markets, and if Nvidia does pull back a little bit, that's going to be nothing more than a buying opportunity because it does see this thing running all the way up towards the 200s, the 190s to 200s by the end of the year. So could Nvidia sell off a bit? If we do get a rejection, it's possible there is a risk of Nvidia coming down, especially since we've been on this big downtrend for many, many months. And if we do get one final pullback, that's going to be nothing more than a buying opportunity because then Nvidia could be looking for a nice rebound, and I think we could be getting closer to $200 to close off the year. So I'm saying that if we get the pullback on Nvidia, it's a nice buy opportunity because once again, fundamentally, the company is doing very, very strongly and they are continuing to see amazing growth, and we could see the potential in the stock. I am a little bit apprehensive about this at the current levels because of the risk of downside, but starting to dollar cost average slowly, if this does drop a bit more, would not be the worst of ideas. And then we're going to see how well this does as time goes on. So overall, there's still a lot of upside potential for Nvidia. So with that being said, guys, heading back to Meta, I just want to say that, Forecaster is a very awesome tool. If you want to use this to just understand the fundamentals of a company, or if you want to use this as a tool to understand if it's smart to start buying a stock as it dips, Meta is the epitome of how accurate Forecaster is. It did a great job at calling out a good time to buy Meta stock. In my previous videos, I did go over that. And overall, I can't wait to see what the future holds for Meta. When it comes to Forecaster, it's a great tool, so I do recommend it. If you guys are interested in signing up, please check out my link down below to save 10% on your membership. Anyways, that's it for this one. I thank you all so much for listening. Have an awesome rest of your guys' weekends, and peace out.